Hello and welcome back to AI Ramblings with Neil McQuanna over there, Michael Parekh over here. Our 34th show for the year of 2025, and we're excited to kind of have a special show this week, if it as it were. A lot has happened in 2025, and we've got two more shows, as I said last week, between this show and next show by the end of the year. So what we thought we'd do this year, this show, episode 34, is to review 2025. What kind of surprised us? What are some of our big takes for the year, both from a Gen Z perspective in terms of my nephew Neil here, and from the older person's perspective over here. But we thought we'd break it up into three big categories. Number one would be big surprises of the year, and then what are some of the favorite and what are some of the things that we thought were overhyped in 2025, both from Neil and my perspective, and then go into the typical thing people do on these year-end shows, which is best product, AI service awards, as it were. We're not doing it like MKBHD with tuxedos, but we are in black. And then the few things that brought us the most joy AI wise this year. So we thought we'd go through that. That was our format for this week. And so let's kick it off. Neil, what do you think, from your perspective, were the surprises of the year 2025 from an AI perspective?
It's like hard to distinguish what was 2025 and what was 2024 because everything moves so fast nowadays. But I
Blur.
want to say one thing that I feel like really had an uptick this year, and we saw it and we discussed it plenty of times, is this whole idea of AI slop, specifically when it comes to AI video generations. I think the biggest headliner was OpenAI with Sora this year, the actual Sora model, but then also the platform that they released the app, which I don't think either of us have actually downloaded and idea. It's mostly
I
been just
did.
through seeing
I
it.
did,
Okay,
actually.
you have. Okay,
I did,
I don't
yeah.
think we had the chance to catch up on that, but yeah, I think surprising from the sense of we knew these things were going to get better. Image was also really good coming into the year, but video really had an uptick, and we've seen it because the amount of times now I'll see something on social media and it actually takes a second to sit down and see, is this a real video or is this AI generated? Is pretty alarming actually compared to what it was like just a couple months ago. So I think that sudden uptick in what it'll do to social media and the way we consume information now, I think is a big surprise of the year in terms of AI slop. So that'll be one of mine. And the other one is going to be the rise of prediction markets. So this is something maybe, we've seen throughout the year, but it's really kicked up in the last few months of the year with, prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket, where essentially we're taking the sports betting craze that's been around for my generation, especially for the last couple of years, and essentially expanding that to everything, where everything is a market. We discussed this a bit on one of our past episodes, how this might change. Our angle for that conversation was more from the insider trading and regulation side of things, but my surprise was more or less how many people were bought onto this and how much has exploded. Also, not only from a user adoption point of view, but also from an industry point of view, with companies like CNN partnering up with Kalshi and Google partnering up with Polymarket. To see that kind of embrace was also a bit surprising to me, but I'd love to get your thoughts on those things as well.
I'd be curious in terms of your friends this year and your circle. Have people around you, whether, been using these things either modestly or aggressively? Any anecdotal things, stories around that front for you?
Yeah, I have a couple friends that, would sports bet and stuff throughout college, and they have kind of made the shift over to this idea of, turning anything into a market. I have friends who have not done any sports betting at all, who saw this and were like, hey, it's interesting. I think I know something about this topic and how it's going to trend. Let me go ahead and put a couple bucks on it. So I do think it widened that aperture to allow more people to kind of have a say in these markets. In terms of anecdotal stories, I can't think of any off the top of my head regarding that, because also I think people are walking a very careful line here where they're trying to be a bit cautious because there is so much bias potentially involved with a lot of these markets. We don't know who has the power to influence some of these things, and some of these predictions, as you have it, are so controllable by one side over the other. So people are maybe a bit more cautious than they would be with sports betting, even though this stuff does happen in sports betting as well. So I think it's moving with caution for now, but as things do come up, which I'm fully expecting them to in the new year, I'll definitely report back.
I've got some friends on the hedge fund side who are actively both on the personal side for some of them and also from an institution side. They're looking at this. Is this an area to actually make money in a professional way? And a couple of friends, especially at places like Jane Street, etc., I've been very focused on some of the broader opportunities around this. That's interesting to watch, but it's just all nascent beginning. We'll see more of it in 2026. So definitely something to keep an eye on. In terms of
Yeah.
your first one, I would say AI slop. Yeah, I did have a chance to try Sora on, we didn't have a chance to talk about it on OpenAI, and it's interesting. I mean, their smart hook was getting you to put your cameo in it, and then seeing you react to everybody making videos of it, of your likeness, as it were. And as long as you give them permission, and there are different settings for that, and that's kind of interesting. The issue I have with it is that there's a novelty factor aspect to this. It's fun initially for a few days. I'm not sure if it has legs to stick,
Yeah.
and so that is one element. The other place where I've had more fun and I've seen more anecdotal and broader activity on a sustained basis is on Google's Nano Banana. People have been using that text to image stuff. You can put it in the bucket of AI slop, and that seems to have a little bit more traction. Although neither company has given us any metrics to judge them, so we don't know where that stands. But in general, both of these areas were in the news over the last few months. The third one is Meta with their Vibes product, and my sense on that is Vibes is a distant number three so far on this part of AI slop creation. And each one of the companies is trying to figure out their path through it. But definitely put a pin on it for 2026. So my surprises of the year, and I'll go through them quickly because I've written a lot about this. I'll have a post up with specific look backs on if people want to read up on these things in detail. But at a high level, the five major surprises from my perspective in no particular order. Number one, OpenAI has just had an extraordinary gangbuster year, right? Both on the up and on the down a little bit, mostly up because they've blasted through a huge amount of innovation around their core GPT and ChatGPT products. We're at 5.2. They've hired a CEO of applications in Fiji Simo, and they've got a plethora of applications and services, agents, etc. They've got big plans for AI devices next year with the Johnny Ive acquisition of $6.5 billion. And the big thing is on compute. There were big articles this week on OpenAI, Google, everyone, all their people are starved for AI compute. And that is ramping up. We're going from hundreds of megawatts of data center capacity to multiple gigawatts of data center capacity in the next 1 or 2 years. And these companies are putting together the financing. OpenAI almost $1.5 trillion of financing. And there were rumblings just in the last couple of days of them raising another $100 billion, an $830 billion valuation, which would put them above SpaceX's potential IPO next year. So OpenAI, big surprise. Not a surprise in terms of that they did all this stuff. It's just that the surprise that they were managed to cram it all in this year. Directionally, we knew they had to do all of these things over the next 2 or 3 years. The big surprise from my perspective was just how much they managed to execute in the year. The other surprise on the glass half empty has been obviously the business of the code red reacting to Gemini. And that's my second surprise, Google's AI comeback. And I actually had been forecasting that for the last 2 years. In August of 20, I said Google would more than come back given their assets. My surprise on this has been that they were able to do it before the year was out in 2025. I thought it would take them another year or so, but no. Everything from TPUs, their chips to build the infrastructure, Gemini 3, and now they just announced Gemini 3 Flash for the Gemini app and everything. I wouldn't be surprised by the first quarter of next year, they are pari passu at 800 million going to 1 billion users per week versus OpenAI. And so those two should be pari passu. So that's my surprise number two. My surprise number three for the year, Meta, April. They just, Zuck, he saw the DeepSeek innovation from China in January, saw how fast the Chinese companies really took open source, and Llama went from number one, the year prior to much further down, and he just decided to revamp, said, I control Meta, Facebook. I have all the board control. We're going to write some big checks. And, end of this year, he's now committed to $300 billion and more over the next 2 or 3 years. Data centers, everything. He hired a bunch of best people from everywhere. Apple, OpenAI, eye-watering numbers, tens of millions per, maybe 100 million plus type of hires. So Meta's super intelligence, MSL, their Meta super intelligence labs effort was the third big surprise, and the move away from Llama. They're working on a big model called Avocado, codenamed Avocado. Who knows what configuration that shows up next year? But that's something to watch. So surprise number 3. Surprise number 4, China taking the lead, literally in the space of this year, from nowhere on open source to 9 out of 10 of their companies are now focused on open source. And Alibaba has taken the lead over DeepSeek in China with Quen. And a surprise on top of surprise. A lot of US companies, especially startups and corporate customers, are using the Alibaba and the other open source models on their own servers. So nothing goes to China, but they're saying, hey, we can actually save a lot of money on compute costs, input and output tokens, and that's a good thing. So that was a surprise number 4. And I thought the very important, again, a lot of details, written a lot about this, but at the high level. Number 5, I remember early this year, we had a bunch of shows. I was really concerned, still am, of the April, administration tariff moves on everywhere in the world, all the countries, 50% on China. And the world seems to have wobbled through it, mostly because the world saw the historical lessons of the 90s, decided they didn't want any part of that. So they accentuated the trade amongst themselves, leaving the US out a little bit. So if you look at the China, Europe, China, Latin America, China, Africa trade, China had a surplus of over $1 trillion with a T. So, and number 2, it's been disparaged as, the administration's taco trades. The administration actually took steps by saying they would have the headline tariff announcements and then negotiate something down. So I think between the combination of those two things, the tariff dent on the economy was less than expected. What countered it all as well was the big run up on AI investments, AI data center, and it physically impacted the GDP numbers in the US. So for all those reasons, we managed to wobble through on the tariff scares for this year. So those are my 5 surprises for this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll first hit on the OpenAI and the Google of it all. Starting with Google, I mean, you had called this a while ago. You're on the record for saying, hey, Google people had written them out early on in this whole thing with OpenAI kind of surging to popularity. And I think they've proven exactly what you had predicted this year, is that they've held strong. They really led the pack with a lot of these areas, like Gemini 3, like Nano Banana, all these areas. And I think this isn't, it's no surprise that I think we're going to expect this just to continue to boom in their direction for 2026. One thing that we didn't mention is Apple. Big changes upcoming for them in the new year, hopefully,
Next week,
regarding Siri, and as soon as next week potentially, so they might squeeze something in for the new year. Who knows? But yeah, this is I think Apple has had a rough year from a public view perspective. From most people, we've remained maybe a bit bullish on it, but most people have written them out, especially with people leaving the company in the last couple of months.
deep bench.
Exactly, but they do have a deep bench of reserves, so we're gonna. I just wanted to mention that to not, just so we don't forget it for the end of the year.
No, they're a good reminder, and we have not forgotten. Remember, next week's show, episode 35, is our thoughts and views and expectations for 2026. So Apple features a fairly large there, but you're totally right.
Exactly.
And don't forget Apple, and so I would highlight. Thank you for highlighting that. Okay,
Definitely.
so let's now move on to the most overhyped things on AI this year. What's because there was a lot of excitement. We were probably as guilty as anybody on some of these items because we did. But at the same time, none of these are all starting points, I'll say, in our defense, that
Yeah.
these things are going to go on for several years, but not necessarily overhyped in general, but maybe they didn't make the impact by the end of this year that they could have theoretically. So why
Yes.
don't you kick it off? Overhyped
So
AI.
yeah,
for
I'm going to start
2025.
off with one that I'm definitely part of the issue of, is the topic of AI browsers. I, was kind of campaigning for these all year and talking about them, really hoping things would pick up, and primarily putting a lot of my faith in OpenAI, ChatGPT with Atlas. I don't think I've actually heard anyone mention Atlas since it released a couple months ago. It's been pretty quiet on that front.
That's
I don't think
OpenAI's, just for people who may not
yeah,
be familiar, just walk through who's doing what, because it's very easy to forget.
exactly. So first off, what is an AI browser? AI browsers take the typical browsing experience, think places like Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and add a layer of AI on top of them. We've kind of moved on from the early days of just bolting a chatbot onto the side of this and really thinking how can we design a browser from, this whole first principles ground up perspective with AI. And the main companies in that space have been the browser company, which was recently acquired by Atlassian. They had first Arc, then Dia. Dia was their AI browser. That was kind of, I would say, one of the early players this year that started to kind of begin this avalanche effect as it is. Then came Perplexity with their AI browser Comet, which is still one that I use fairly often. I am weaning off a bit, hence the whole overhyped title. And then ChatGPT launched Atlas. Those are the three main players. There are, of course, other players as always in this space, but those are the three main headliners. Again, we'll have to see what Apple does with Safari, and what Google continues to do with Chrome. Chrome in my head is not full AI browser yet because it is still the flagship browser. So I think until they turn that switch internally, where they will want to focus a bit more or potentially spin off the product to a more AI first browser, I think that still falls under the traditional browser in my category.
But there were reports of things they're experimenting with, GenTabs, a bunch of other
Yes.
things that are in the lab, as it were. So they're totally
No.
focused on it. Just want to
Yes.
highlight that Google is being Google
Definitely.
and
And
experimenting. So expect things there.
And exactly. And Google does fall into this conversation we've had about the whole incumbents versus startups of it all. Google being the biggest player in this space, it's a benefit, it's a pro and a con for them where they have the biggest user base, but because of that, they may not be able to innovate and push out these really cutting edge features to everyone. This is why they have these internal labs as it is, and things like beta testing and certain flags that you can turn on inside of Chrome itself to enable these features. The reason I bring that up is I was really hoping we would see a little bit not more adoption, but more creative use cases than what have come out in the past year for AI browsers. I do still think it is a chatbot with the search feature built in, and I think it could be much more than that. So tracking that for 2026, I do think it will end up growing into that. Again, there are a lot of growing pains with things like this because it comes down to social engineering and how we actually use the things that we use every day in new ways now. So that was one item. The other item being AI voice. This is something we've discussed for a while, and hopefully Apple will be able to come and save the day a bit with Siri. But regarding AI voice assistants, I think a company has still not maybe figured out the way to leverage these models through the modal of voice yet. I know we've discussed, the advent of typing, then touch, then voice being this like next, third wave of us interacting with technology. And voice is something that's been around for a while, but I don't think has been fully dialed in yet with AI because it does, again, feel like a bit of an afterthought. So hoping for 2026, companies maybe take a bit more one foot in front of the other approach with this because I think it's an area that still leaves a bit wanting.
Absolutely. This is one to watch for next year and beyond. Apple is scheduled to announce their AI Siri next year, so not a big surprise there. And then Alexa this year did make some noise on Alexa Plus. I asked my Alexa over here in the other room, when do I get Alexa Plus? It said it's rolling out. So, and they already had a big show in New York kind of walking through all of this. So it's all coming is the problem. It's just that we're at the end of the year and there's not been huge visible mainstream traction on it. So I agree, overhyped. My three overhyped things, and I've written a lot about all three of them. And given that I look at things from an investment point of view as well, but the overhype on my end is also on the financial side. People are, investors are, I think, getting a teeny bit ahead of themselves on three areas. Number one, AI humanoid robots. That's seen tens of billions of dollars of investment, both private and public. I'm very excited about it. I think robots are where self-driving cars were 15 years ago. So I think they've got 15, 20 years to go. As a cautionary remark, I did a big post on iRobot of Roomba fame, doing chapter 11 bankruptcy, being bought by a Chinese company, one of their suppliers. The Chinese companies are way ahead on humanoid robots. I'm very excited about this category Tesla is the poster child for this. It's gone over $1.5 trillion market cap as an auto company with the best auto companies in the world like Toyota and BYD under 250 billion. So there's a big disparity on that front, but that can be maintained for a long time because Elon is Elon and everyone's excited about it. So that's the humanoid robots is one where I continue to think the hype is warranted over the long term, meaning 10 years or more, but overdone in the short term. So I mark that one. Second one is expectations for self-driving, not cars, but self-driving robotic fleets, whether it's robotaxis, Waymo. I'm very excited about all of that. But I think the biggest beneficiaries on a financial side, if you want to get excited about it, are the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world, because you're going to need huge amount of fleet management and demand creation into the funnel. And those companies have that. None of the the Waymos of Google fame or Tesla with robotaxi, they have to build all that. And yet the market has already given them, especially Tesla, several $100 billion of valuation ahead of that. As an internet analyst from the 90s, where I ran Goldman's internet effort, I've seen this movie before, and we are a little ahead of our skills. So don't worry about, if you're asking, is AI, there's an AI bubble, worry about the AI bubbles in these areas, as opposed to the broader AI bucket. Second overhyped area. Third is AI agents, especially on the enterprise side. A lot of excitement earlier this year. Microsoft, Salesforce, selling AI agents into the enterprise. Companies are interested. They're trying it, but the products are early. The technologies are early. Just in the last 2 weeks, Anthropic, which helped create the Model Control Protocol, MCP, put it in the public domain in the open source. So lot has to be built on this, and that is the substrate, along with a bunch of other initiatives. You're going to need to build AI agents that can actually do useful things. So it's an at least 12, 18, 24-month thing, but AI agents were overhyped this year. And going into the end of the year, it's not surprising that, the pricing for some of these things have gone down. The sales expectations have gone down relative to earlier in the year. And it will have a slower ramp up. I've written a lot about all of this. So just a highlight on that. So those are my three overhyped area. So this brings up us to the best AI products of the year, kind of thing. It could be product, it could be physical devices, AI services. So who do you want to give awards to? If we had tuxedos, this is where we would walk out in our tuxedos.
Yeah, if we had tuxedos, my first one is maybe not what most people would have thought of, and this is more or less me maybe being a bit late to the trend, and the trend, catching up. Is the Kindle Paperwhite. I got one of those this year.
I have to show people, because you
You have to
got
show
to
people.
show and tell. I
Show
know
and tell,
you have it
exactly.
somewhere. Yeah, go ahead.
I have mine somewhere, and I maybe haven't been able to pick it up as much recently, but it really was
And the smaller one, it comes in matcha
exactly
color. I love
that.
this one.
That's the one I have, the smaller one. I love that it's handheld, it's small, and I can kind of put it in a pocket and take it anywhere. Essentially, it was really cool. I think in this growing age where everyone's on their phones all the time, we talk about AI slop. It's nice to be able to just pick up a device that has none of that. Doesn't even have a color screen, a fully paper white e-ink screen and read on there. I think is really special. AI features will come to this eventually, I'm sure, in areas like summarization and bookmarks. But I think where it stands right now, it probably is one of my highlights of the year.
No distractions, no notifications. You can
Yeah.
focus. You can read a book. Number 3, number 4, you can read them in outside with the sun shining on the beach or by the pool. So awesome. Great stocking stuffers if people are still looking for Christmas gifts for family. And by the way, there is an Amazon Paperwhite Kindle for kids. Another thing, if you're looking for especially kids on your list, I think they start at $60, $70. They come with dozens of books, hundreds of books with a subscription service on top if you want. So I just wanted to jump in on
Yeah.
because I couldn't agree more with this as a product of the year.
No,
And
for sure.
Amazon this year upgraded all of them with better screens, brighter screens, etc. Couldn't agree more with your pick on the product of the
Exactly.
year.
Yeah,
And
and then
do you have? Go ahead.
yeah, and then my next one, which kind of leads into your first one, so we can kind of probably do this one in a joint effort. We discussed it last episode, I believe, but it would be, the iPhone 17 Pro Max. We both,
In orange,
different
not in that
colors,
silver one over there.
different colors, but same device. Yeah, I don't know. I think with this influx of devices every year, I think once again, Apple proves to be the most consistent with the iPhones, and I know a lot of people give them flack for not having headline AI features, but they really are doing a lot of AI and machine learning under the hood that people aren't realizing. And the reason I put this device is just because the power of the new chips that they have and the way they've kind of tied it all into their ecosystem, which I think is the main underlying thing that a lot of people are forgetting here, is that Apple does kind of control the entire ecosystem end to end. And when they do want to eventually press that button for AI, I think it's going to provide a lot more value than some of these other companies are able to. So yeah, I think those would be my main picks for the year if I had a tuxedo on right now.
I love it. I'm going to echo, and that is my product of the year as well. The iPhone 17 Pro Max. I've been dailying the Pro Max for years, and the 17 does not disappoint. It's a tank. It's got huge battery life. It's got amazing GPUs, etc. So you can do some basic AI, local AI processing on this stuff. I, of course, would recommend people get the pop socket, especially the pop socket with a kick out strand. This is not a gadget site, but we love showing off our favorite gadgets because it flips out and does this thing. I couldn't agree more. Product of the year, lot of excitement. My other two in terms of AI services this year, number two, is in terms of I've not been as I use ChatGPT, I use Gemini, but the AI chatbot I've been using the most as a search thing has been Perplexity for most of the year. That I will officially say is waning going into from the last month on. I've been moving more to Gemini, not because I'm going to Gemini the app, which I am, but Gemini is showing up where I am, which is in Google searches on Chrome and etc. The AI mode, the AI overview is showing up, and they are just like a Gemini surprised OpenAI for a code red. I would imagine there's a code red at Perplexity as well. So Perplexity remains my product of the year, but if I were to do this again for next year, I wouldn't be surprised if Gemini has taken over on that front. And my third product of the year, which is we've had 6 or 7 versions of this from the Samsungs and the Googles of the world, is the fold phones. And there are two this year, and I was lucky enough to go get both of them. Here is the one from Google, which is the Fold 10. And here's the equivalent one from Samsung, which is the Fold 7. And the Fold 7, if you look at all the reviews, this is not a gadget site. By the way, if you all think you'd like more information on all of this, we can do a separate show on this. You hit us up in the comments and we can give you a lot more detailed perspectives on it. But this is the Google Fold and this is the Samsung Fold. The Samsung Fold is thinner. Google's a little thicker. This has a lot more of the Google AI features built into this, which is awesome. They're also available for the most part on the Samsung. They're both expensive, in the 1500-ish kind of level, good battery life, etc. But these are also my products of the year, especially from an AI point of view, because either one of them, if you open them up, they open up to an 8-inch screen on the inside, which equals my other favorite gadget last year, which is the the Apple iPad mini, which is a great product. But here's the comparison of the sizes. You see 8 inches versus 9 inches on the profile. And you can even put pop sockets on those things. Those are my gadgets. Sorry, turning this into a gadget review site, not trying to compete with MKBHD, but I love gadgets, so I had to do that. And now we can, go through we're almost done with the end of our tuxedo phase, but that takes us to the third section, which is the AI products or services that were the most used on our part and brought us the most joy, qualitatively defined. And so on that front, Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, I have to echo what you just said for the last item, but given that it is something I interact with the most, I would say the two items that have maybe give me the most joy are AI services, one being ChatGPT, of course, from OpenAI. I know it's kind of a
Yeah.
cliche answer, but also Perplexity. I do still main Comet as my browser for every day, even though I do think it's been a bit of a overhype and maybe not met the mark that I had set for it, which was pretty high given all the early traction. I do still think it's a very well made product and service that provides me joy that maybe I'm not getting on a lot of these other traditional services throughout the year. In the similar categories. Those would be my two main hits. And of course, ChatGPT is just continued to grow throughout the year. And yeah, I would say those are my two.
I love it. My joy product of the year is the iPhone Air. Indulgent because I normally walk around typically with two daily phones, the 17 Pro Max and the Air, a little smaller but amazingly thin. Awesome. It makes you feel great every time you use it. People have complained about it. It's got a lower battery life. It only has one camera. It's expensive, still about $1,000. Blah blah blah, and lower battery life because it's thin. But I love it every time I use it, and I use it a lot on trips, especially lighter, doom scrolling. Everything is awesome on this thing. So that's my joy product for this year, along with all the other stuff I've talked about. Which takes us into my last joy product of this year, which is, and I talked about it a little bit on the last show, I've been a big fan. You talked about the Kindle, and I've been a big fan of the Kindle Scribe, which came out about 3 years ago. And this is a kind of a 10, 11-inch screen that there's a pen, so you can write on these things. So that's the core thing, and you have your full Kindle collection. They upgraded it last year with their Kindle Scribe of 24, also black and white, awesome. But this year they just came out a couple of weeks ago with the Kindle Scribe Color Soft, which has a color screen, which is awesome. And I just got it a few days ago, and I've been loving it. You can actually do a yellow pad as a template on this thing, which is
Wow.
to write notes and so on. And obviously, I use my iPads, my 10 and 11 inch, for notes, with all the notes apps, etc. But it is again the same advantages you talked about. Multi-day battery life. You can use it outside. All of that stuff. The Kindle Scribe, Color Scribe. Sorry, Kindle Scribe Color Soft is what you
Yeah,
search
yeah.
for. Is my joy product of this.
Wonderful.
Well, I've had it for a week, so I would add that. Do you have any thoughts on any of that, or any of these other toys I had to
Yeah,
you indulge?
the iPhone Air, I've tried it through whenever we've hung out. I do think the analogy that you had of this kind of being the equivalent of having a sports car in your driveway along with your SUV and sedan, I think is very true. I wanted to highlight that because a lot of people do, I think are misunderstanding what Apple aimed to do with this. I think this is more of a luxury item that not everyone would want two phones or want to use this as their primary. But if you do have the ability to afford, two phones here, I do think it provides value. Again, I can completely understand why people are a bit frustrated by it, but I think, in edge cases like yourself, I think it really does provide value.
And I'll say all of these products, they go very well with our other core product for last year, which always doesn't get attention, but AirPods are just bloody
Yeah,
amazing as a system. And so, especially because again, what do? We listen, we talk to people, we do podcasts, we watch YouTube, etc. AirPod 3s, actually, it is one of the products of the year. I just didn't want to make this a total product
yeah.
show review thing. So I just wanted to throw that in at the end. And that takes us to the end of our episode 35, and that's how we kind of see and wind down with AI for 2025. So we're very excited. Join us next week for episode 35, where we talk about, this was 34, so we'll talk about episode 35 for how we see 2026. Everything from the big events to what we think hopefully can surprise us, and of course, gadgets and AI things we're looking forward for next year. There's a lot to look forward to, and we'll keep Santa Claus busy next year as well.
Definitely.
With that, I want to thank you all for joining us for episode 34 of AI Ramblings. We want to wish you the best for the holidays, for everything ahead the next couple of weeks, and especially this week. And again, thank you for joining us. Comments, feedback, always appreciated. Of course, likes and subscribes as well. And as usual, please stay tuned.
Thanks. See you next time.